CT, what is one thing you wish you would have known before you began your career?
It's always good to start with the hardest of damn questions. Probably that this was an internal problem to be solved. One of the problems people face is that they look at the market and they think that it is a problem to be solved, that somewhere there is an answer. There's the perfect trading system, perfect indicator, perfect whatever. And it takes a long time to realise that the only problem that needs to be solved is you. Trading is an internal endeavour. It's not external at all. And pardon me, lots of people wasted years trying to solve the market before I actually began to think about solving myself.
What do you got to solving yourself?
It's overcoming that belief that there is something to be solved, something that you can control. And so it's this notion of letting go. Because when you look at the literature, there's an interesting thing with people. And a lot of what you learn about trading comes from other fields. When they look at people who enter lotteries, people who enter lotteries tend to value the numbers they have picked at a higher value than the numbers that have been picked randomly. They've all got the same chance of winning. Your numbers are not important, but it's that act of control of picking them that you think in some way, shape or form enhances your control over the market. And so people think that if they get more information, more indicators, more tools, that is somehow a mechanism of control. When in actual fact, trading is a profession of letting go. Because a share price will do whatever it wants to do, irrespective of whether you're involved or not. You're an irrelevancy to it. You're completely irrelevant. Whether you're on board or not, it has no bearing.
So you're saying you can be a control freak, but only about your trading plan. Everything else you've got to let go.
You've just got to, once you're in the water, that's it. You will go where you go. And it will go with or without you. And no amount of research, going to annual meetings, listening to talking heads on TV will actually in any way change that at all. So you've got to learn to let go.
What is your biggest failure? And what did you learn from it?
That's an interesting question because I don't tend to chronicle failures. For some reason, it's never been part of my personality. If I was to say one, it would relate to the first question, and that is the inability to understand that this was not a problem to be solved. It was an endeavour to be undertaken, and the two are different in tone and intent. And that's where I used to trip myself up continually, because when you're an arrogant wanker like me and you're used to solving problems, your ego gets in the way and you can't see that you are actually the problem. And this is something I see with all traders, is that they can't see that they're the problem. It's just this notion of self-awareness is a fleeting thing in a lot of people. And it comes and it goes and it comes and it goes. And for many people, their self-awareness is not sufficient to get them to the point of being able to trade. Because it's not sufficient to get.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's not sufficient to get them to the point of just letting go.
Were there a couple of times where you actually put the wrong trade on?
I did. The last time was I had the cleaners in the background at my old house, and I was trying to get an order on the spyway, and they turned up early. They were annoying the living daylights out of me for turning up early. Because you have them timed so that they don't turn up at the time you're entering orders. And I was rushing to get it done, and fat fingers, the order was out by an order of magnitude, which is, quite a big amount. So I was in and out very, very quickly because when it's that size and your position size the same way and you stop in the same spot, small perturbation just takes you out and you go, oh, shit, no, I'm going to go out. I've had enough for the day. That's it.
We've had this conversation before. Everyone has failures. It's just that a lot of people don't mention or admit it.
Yeah, but I see, I don't view structural failures as a thing. For example, I don't view losing trades as a failure. They're not a thing. They're only a failure if you look back and you realised you've done something really stupid and it's a pattern you repeat. Because trading is a profession of making mistakes, and that's a hard thing for people to overcome. Uh, this notion that there is no nexus between being right and making money trips people up all the time.
Mm.
And so I don't mind getting trades wrong, because it's just, it's par for the course in this profession. And I've never had catastrophically large losses. You know, you have trades that go wrong, or in the early days where stops were not a thing, you have trades that blow through stops, or where, you know, you envisage a stop to be, but they're par for the course. My failings are internal.
Have you been trading for such a long time now that when you get to a drawdown period, which are inevitable, do you know that you've just got to sit it out?
It's like everything else. It's par for the course. Life takes a certain trajectory, and life has periods where it's really good, where it's a bit ordinary, and where it's shit. And it's just the way it is. It's the same in all businesses. And this is part of the mythology of trading. Part of the mythology of trading is that you'll never go into drawdown, you'll never have losing trades. It will always be perfect.
Mm.
And that's the nonsense that the internet produces. And that's not true. But it's the only profession in the world where you can fail your way to a Porsche.
So when you're failing your way into a drawdown, what do you do to soothe yourself psychologically that, you know, you're going to come out of it?
Nothing. Just keep going.
Just keep grinding.
You just keep going. It's a little bit like, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and he's just gone back to mountain biking, and of course goes out a few times, comes back with a broken rib. Brilliant. But we're having a conversation about expectations of sport. We're talking about martial arts, and in the martial arts, your expectation is that you will get hit. It's just the way it is. Everybody gets hit, and everybody gets sat on their ass. There is no way around that. You can't defeat that expectation at all. The only way not to have that occur is not to do it. Trading's the same. I always have the expectation that you will enter drawdown. It's just the way it is. In all businesses are the same. There are really good days to be in the restaurant business and really crap days. There are really good days to be a widget maker and really bad days. That's just the way it is. There's no way around it. And it's an amateurish, childish approach that people have in terms of not understanding that. And that's one of the biggest problems they face. They just don't understand that trading goes wrong.
What advice would you give to someone trying to pursue a career in trading, you know, pretty similar to yours?
Do medicine. There's a few. That's such a complicated question. There's a few things to unpack. It comes back to expectations. What are your expectations from doing this? If your expectation is that by Friday you will be trading an account of $50 million, that's not going to happen. Mm. Much of the difficulty people face is in their expectation. And look, in many ways, I don't blame them, because, again, the internet infects people with this notion, and particularly social media, that it's really, really simple. The money just pours in and you never have to worry about anything. Now, if your expectation is that this is a skill you're going to master and have for the rest of your life, that's a different thing. Mm. So it's a matter of setting the groundwork for what your expectations are. If your expectations aren't correct, it's not that the rest of it becomes easy, it's that the rest of it becomes tolerable.
Mm.
But without that groundwork, then it's really just a profession of disappointment. And this is why so many traders come and go. I'll use an analogy from my past. When I first started in martial arts at about 12, it used to be that probably, look, when I got my black belt several years later, no one I'd started with was still training. Why not? Well, because it takes years. It takes years of grinding, sweating, getting hurt, getting injured, getting over the hump of hurting other people. And it takes time. But my expectation was that it was a skill to master over the long term. Most people enter the martial arts, and they probably still do it now. They certainly did it way back then. On the belief that, in a month's time, I'll be a lethal weapon and I'll have to register my hands with the police. In a month's time, you still probably won't be able to tie your belt properly. Again, we come back to expectations. The expectation is incorrect. And if the expectation is incorrect, then everything becomes so difficult and so hard, and you're dispirited by the first little hurdle and you give up. And the default setting for most people is to give up. So my advice to people who want this sort of career is look at what your expectations are. Look at what your motivations are. What do you want from this profession? Because in the initial stages, there are much easier ways to make money.
I sent my nephew a guitar, a 3/4 red Torino guitar. And I said, now, sweetheart, you've got a lot of talent, but you need to practice every day so you get your frets right. Like trading it. But once you have it, you'll always have it.
But that's the thing. If you look at people, for example, who are uber exceptional musicians, what do they do every day? They practice scales. They don't rip open a piece of Beethoven. They start with their scales and they do them ad infinitum for years because their expectations are correct. Their expectations are that these foundational steps are part of the bigger picture. And unless you can get that grinding notion of basics, steps, long term, then the profession's a hard one to do.
Let's talk about some great resources. What are some of your favourites that have helped you along the way?
That's a really good question because the world now is so different to the world when I started.
When did you start? The 80s?
1983. So sometime last century, which sounds a long time ago, there were no resources. There just weren't. Getting books was nigh on impossible because you would have to order them from the US, and Americans, being as they are, would naturally send them to Austria because Austria sounds like Australia, so it must be the same thing. The ASX eventually had a bookshop and an education centre, but that was many years down the track. And so resources were thin on the ground. The best resource I had was my own account and my own being too stupid to stop. And that's a cornerstone of all success. You just have to be too stupid to stop.
How did you teach yourself?
I would put a trade on and lose money. Put another trade on and lose money. Put another trade on and lose money. Fortunately, derivatives were appearing in the form of options. And the options market then was very different to the options market today, in that even in its early years, it had much more volume. It was much more dynamic because the range of shares was contracted. Now, any idiot who wants to have their share traded as exchange traded options can. It's incredibly stupid. And so I seem to, because being quantitative, understood how they worked. But even then, it was an expensive process to learn. You would still put trades on, get them wrong, put trades on, get them wrong. And it was just a matter of chronicling what you did wrong. And I think that's where my background from research comes in, that you're a data collector.
Mm.
You want to know why things went wrong. Why didn't that work? Why was that a cock up? Why did this work? And so you can begin to see over time patterns and ideas. But I was still caught in that notion of this is a problem to be solved. And because options were quantitative, you could solve them, but it didn't solve the problem of your interaction with the instrument in the market.
Which came later.
Which came a lot later.
So at the moment, you're doing a lot of podcasts, which are fantastic. What have you listened to recently that you found inspiring? What inspires
Not
you?
a thing. Not a thing. I know that's a terrible answer. Not a thing. The last person that I encountered who I thought had it all going on and organised, and we'll leave aside historical figures because they've been and gone, was when we went to see Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut. And simply because I sort of lump inspiration in with motivation, and they're both defeated by discipline. Because I interpret motivation as that stupid Anthony Robbins style bullshit of, I'll con people into pretending they're walking on hot coals, or con people into thinking that they can break boards with their hands. Now, trust me, as someone who's gone through a dozen tiles at a single go and a grading, it's a damn sight harder than people think. At these motivational seminars, they use what I know as fake boards.
That makes so much sense.
It's just the way it is. And I put motivation in that stupid category of people who are like 2-year-olds who've had too much red cordial. They run around again, ooh, and fall over. Then they come back the next year and repeat, never having done anything in the year in between. But the reason Hadfield interested me was because he was functional. He set out with an end in mind, and the end in mind was to be an astronaut. That's a difficult thing when you're a farm boy from Canada, because Canada doesn't have a space program, as was pointed out to him apparently by his mother on numerous occasions. But he set out a plan. How do I do this? All right. At the time, most astronauts were former fighter pilots. So I joined the Canadian Air Force. Oh, I need a degree. I'll do engineering. Most astronauts have a quantitative degree. They're mathematicians, physicists, aeronautical engineers, mechanical engineers. Did that. Oh, a lot of them are test pilots. I think I'll go to test pilot school, see if I can get in there. And everything was these constant steps towards an end point. And because it's functional, that appeals to me, because so many people have an end point, but there's nothing in between. There's this sort of nebulous bullshit idea they have, somewhere way off here. And it's that, sort of tomorrow I will do. Well, yeah, that's all well and good, but how are you going to get there? What are the individual steps? How is it going to happen? And until those steps are in place, nothing happens. And it doesn't matter what it is in life. It doesn't matter whether it's getting fit, working on yourself, working on your relationships, eating properly. All of them are composed of small functional steps. And people seem to think that change is seismic in nature. That, let's take the notion of getting fit. For some reason they get motivated as summer appears and they're going to get fit. Okay, what are you going to do? Don't know. Okay, how about we first define what get fit means? So we have some metrics to follow along the way. We have some idea of what it means, some idea of, how will you know when you're there? Is it running a 5K? Is it deadlifting twice your own body weight? Is it getting your body weight under control? What's the metric? Once we've got an endpoint, then we can measure that, because what can be measured can be managed. And then we start bit by bit by bit.
Just looking at what's behind you there, Spitfires, I think you're a closet, could be in another life, pilot/astronaut.
I'm a closet historian. Well, it's not so much of a closet, actually, if you look at my bookshelf. It's simply because it's there's no new problems. And this is the thing people don't understand. People now think that the problems they have and the problems of society at large are new. Let's take the sort of tension between generations. Every generation thinks that the one coming up behind them are complete and utter losers. And that might be actually true for this generation, apparently, unfortunately. But Plato, several thousand years ago, whinged about the same thing. My father whinged about it, a generation and a bit ago. History provides clues, which is why I can't understand why people are not historians of markets. People seem to think that markets only began when they noticed them. No, they didn't. We've had markets for a very, very, very long time. People think Bitcoin is new. No, it's not. We did that 300 years ago. It was called the South Sea Bubble. It was also called the Dutch Tulip Boom. We've done all of this before. And once you understand that, that's the way the world works.
Who are the people who have been most influential to you?
Another good question. In that they probably have to be segmented by points of time in your life. If we pick the last 2 decades and a bit, it would be my business partner, simply because she convinced me to come out from under my rock. And so I'm sitting here talking to you 2 and a bit decades later, because otherwise I'd be happily ensconced in just doing my own thing, not really being out in the public eye, because it's not my thing. It's not. So
thanks to Louise, she got you under your rock, away from your rock, and you talk to us now.
Yeah, blame her. She's entirely to blame. I blame her for everything, actually. It's a handy default position. You need to find someone you can blame for everything.
What's one myth about your trading in the share market that you want to debunk?
That's a good question. It would be, okay, there's probably a few. It would, one of the foundation ones that I recognise as problematic for everyone is simply the notion that advisors know what they're talking about. They don't. They don't have a clue. Think of it this way. You would never go to a surgeon who killed every patient. But once you've gone to a fund manager, you've effectively gone to a surgeon who has killed every patient. Now, not literally, but metaphorically, think about this. If the average person is represented in terms of health by the return that the market generates, and death is represented by underperforming the market, every fund manager that you'll come across has killed their patients because they've all underperformed the market. Surely if you knew what you were doing, you would outperform the market, you would have positive alpha, but they don't. And what is intriguing about it is they're not even embarrassed. You should be enormously embarrassed by the fact that you take a vast salary, and their salaries are vast, for being mediocre. And if I wanted to steal from Winston Churchill, that never in the history of human endeavour have so many paid so much to so few for so friggin' little. And it is no wonder the index funds are so popular, because the moment, for example, if you have superannuation here in Australia, on average, the moment you move from your fund to an index fund, your performance doubles.
Oh my God.
The average performance of fund managers is so poor. And the intriguing thing is that people believe that stockbrokers know what they're talking about. By and large, they don't. By and large, they're pushing their own book, instrumentalities they're involved in some way, corporate, personally, whatever. It's not this capacity to sit back and go, you know what, market's stuffed. I don't think you should do anything for 6 months. They can't do that. They go broke because they're caught in a moral hazard. And the moral hazard is that the remuneration is linked to turnover, not profitability. And so you're always going to get that tension between the two. And humans being humans, guess which one wins? money. It's not doing the right thing. And broking used to attract a certain sort of personality because the amount of money pre-deregulation was so extreme. But when we had fixed commissions, I mean, commissions used to start at 2.5%. And that was fixed. But it was fixed against a minimum order of $110, $120 and an order fee of $15 and stamp duty. I'm now transacting for literally, well, you shouldn't say nothing because that's not correct, but it is figuratively nothing. The transaction costs are frictionless. So they have to be the way they are.
All right. What does freedom mean to you?
Time.
To do what?
It's always time. Anything. It's simply time. One of the things that catches people is that their time is not their own. And one of the things that has been intriguing about the lockdown in COVID, and here in Melbourne, we're in lockdown 2.0, because, we're a city populated by complete and utter frigging idiots, is that people have realised that their time is not their own. Their lives are controlled by someone else. When you look at, again, we come back to things that are from other fields. When they look at mental health in athletes, they find athletes thrive on a series of criteria: autonomy, mastery, purpose. They do their own thing, they set about learning their skill, and they have a purpose for that skill. Lockdowns removed that for athletes. It's also removed it for everybody else because people have realised it's brought home to them they don't have autonomy. If your business shuts and you're an employee of that business, well, to use a technical term, you're stuffed. You don't have autonomy. You don't have control over what you do or your time. So when people say to you, right, you're not working now for the next 6 weeks, you're on your own, all of a sudden you've inherited time and you've got no idea what to do with it because you don't understand how to generate your own autonomy to control your own time. Freedom for me is time. And I don't have the problem of being told what to do. Yes, it's annoying being stuck within 5K of your own home, not being able to troop around like you do. But my freedom is still well beyond what other people's is. And when lockdown's over, it's orders of magnitude beyond what people do. Get up when I want, do what I want during the day, all things people wish they could do, but can't because...
You say time, but you also say purpose a lot.
You've got to have some idea of where you're going. Otherwise, your life is wasted on you. The time you've been allotted, to steal from Abraham Lincoln, your 407, he simply wasted on you. And it's that old thing of people probably get to the end and go, well, that's because you've wasted it. And I saw a fascinating TED talk by an American paramedic who was talking about death because he worked in a neighbourhood where there was a lot of extreme violence. And he was talking about the fact that when he would attend something like a shooting and someone was clearly dying, that they would say to him, am I going to be all right? And he would say yes. And then he realised that was the wrong thing to do because they weren't. They were going to die. And people realised that they were going to die. It seems to be a thing we have. When you've suffered a catastrophic injury. And so he started telling people, look, you are going to die, but I'm here. And the thing they almost all said was, I thought there'd be more time. People waste their time. They waste it in crap relationships, crap jobs, crap suburbs, crap environment. People talk about, when I retire, I'll go to Italy. Why not go now while you're physically able of getting up and down all the friggin' steps they have? Because Italy is the land of steps.
The Duomo.
And people who can't drive. Yeah. And people who can't drive and can't park either. But that's just the way it is. They're very glamorous while not being able to do any of those things. And people just waste time.
Okay, so if you were in my shoes at the end of 30 minutes of talking to you, what question would you ask you that I haven't asked you yet?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. That's such a powerful question. I don't really have a decent answer.
How many push-ups can you do?
In any way, shape or form. Quite a few, actually, because I did quite a few this morning. This morning was squat press day. It's a very unpleasant day. It's an awful day, Mondays. So, because I've been thinking about that, even whilst I was working out, I was thinking, I don't really know. And it's one of those things that I can guarantee you, the moment we stop speaking, I'll go, should have been that. Because that's the way the world works.
I'll ask you next time, don't worry.
Yeah, there you go.
CT, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Caroline.